What $1,000 bought you in every decade, life-changing money lost value. Imagine having $1,000 in your pocket. Today, that might pay some bills, maybe a top-of-the-line smartphone, or a modest vacation. But what if I told you that just a few decades ago, those same $1,000 could completely change your life? Welcome to the fascinating world of inflation and purchasing power. In this video, we're going to take a journey through time to discover what exactly $1,000 could buy in each decade, from the 1920s to today. Get ready to be shocked by how much money has lost its value and to understand why your grandparents always say, "Back in my day, everything was cheaper." Let's get started. The 1920s, the Jazz Age. In the Roaring '20s, $1,000 wasn't just a lot of money. It was an absolute fortune. What you could buy. With $1,000 in 1920, you could buy an entire house in many American cities. That's right, a complete house. The average price of a home was around $3,800, so $1,000 represented more than a quarter of the total value. You could also buy a brand new Ford Model T for just $260. That means with $1,000, you could buy almost 4 cars. An average annual salary was about $1,400. Therefore, having $1,000 was equivalent to almost 9 months of work for an average person. Other impressive examples. A gallon of milk cost about 33 cents. A pound of bread, 9 cents. A dozen eggs, 34 cents. A movie ticket, 15 cents. This was a time of economic prosperity in the United States before the Great Depression. Industrialization was at its peak, and the American dream seemed within reach for many. $1,000 in that era could literally establish the beginning of a new life. The 1930s, the Great Depression. The 30s brought the devastating Great Depression, but ironically, deflation made $1,000 have even more purchasing power. What you could buy. During the Depression, prices fell drastically. A house that cost $3,000 in 1929 could be found for $1,500 in 1933. With $1,000, you could buy a small house in rural areas, acquire 3 used cars in good condition, alive comfortably for over a year. An average annual salary had fallen to about $1,300, making $1,000 equivalent to almost 10 months of work. Some prices from the era. Bread, 8 cents. Gallon of milk, 28 cents. Pound of coffee, 26 cents. A movie ticket, 10 to 20 cents. Unemployment reached 25%. Having $1,000 in cash during the Depression was extremely rare and valuable. While millions lost everything, those who had money on hand could make investments that would yield fortunes in the following decades. The 1940s, War and Recovery. The 40s were marked by World War II and the beginning of American economic recovery. What you could buy. With the war economy in full swing, $1,000 still had significant purchasing power. You could make a down payment on a comfortable suburban house, buy 2 new Chevrolet cars, which cost about $500 each, pay for 4 years of tuition at a public university. The average annual salary had risen to about $2,000, so $1,000 represented 6 months of work. Typical prices. A gallon of gasoline, 11 cents. Bread, 10 cents. A steak, 39 cents per pound. A movie ticket, 25 cents. Historical context. The war effort brought full employment, and despite rationing, there was optimism. War bonds were popular, and $1,000 invested could yield significantly in the post-war period. The 1950s, the post-war boom. The 50s saw the explosion of American suburbs and the birth of the modern middle class. What you could buy. $1,000 was still a substantial amount, but post-war inflation was beginning to take effect. With $1,000 you could make a down payment on a suburban house with a garage, buy a new Chevrolet Bel Air, which cost about $2,000, buy 50 shares of IBM, which would become a fortune. The average annual salary was about $3,000, so $1,000 represented 4 months of work. Some prices. A gallon of gasoline, 18 cents. Bread, 14 cents. A gallon of milk, 92 cents. New television, $200. Historical context. It was the era of the American dream realized. Home ownership, car in the garage, and modern appliances. $1,000 could completely equip a new home with refrigerator, stove, and even a television. The 1960s, change in counterculture. The 60s brought social and economic transformation. Inflation was beginning to accelerate. What you could buy. $1,000 still had weight, but not as much as before. You could buy a brand new Volkswagen Beetle, cost about $1,600. Pay for 2 years of tuition at a public university. Buy 100 shares of Coca-Cola. The average annual salary was about $5,000, so $1,000 represented 2.5 months of work. Prices of the decade. A gallon of gasoline, 25 cents. Bread, 20 cents. New house, $14,000 on average. Movie ticket, $1. Historical context. This was the decade of the space race, the Beatles, and major social changes. The cost of living was rising, but the economy was strong. The 1970s, inflation and crisis. The 70s were marked by galloping inflation and oil crises. What you could buy. Inflation began to seriously erode purchasing power. $1,000 was still useful, but increasingly less so. With $1,000 you could buy a used car in good condition. Pay for a year of university tuition. Buy 20 shares of Microsoft when it launched in 1975. The average annual salary reached $9,000 by the end of the decade, so $1,000 represented just over a month of work. Rising prices. A gallon of gasoline, 53 cents, rose sharply due to crises. Bread, 25 cents. New house, $23,000 on average. New car, $3,500. Historical context. The oil crises of 1973 and 1979 caused severe inflation. The word stagflation entered the vocabulary. $1,000 lost much of its value in this decade. The 1980s, Reaganomics and yuppies. The 80s brought economic recovery, but with much higher prices. What you could buy. $1,000 was now clearly less impressive. You could buy a basic personal computer. Pay for 1 semester at a state university. Make a down payment on a used car. The average annual salary was around $19,000, so $1,000 represented less than 3 weeks of work. Prices of the decade. A gallon of gasoline, $1.12. Bread, 50 cents. New house, $76,000 on average. New car, $7,500. Historical context. It was the era of stock market growth, the first personal computers, and conspicuous consumerism. $1,000 was good money, but didn't change lives like before. The 1990s, digital era. The 90s saw the internet boom and accelerated globalization. What you could buy. $1,000 had utility, but was clearly money for expenses, not for major investments. With $1,000 you could buy a decent desktop computer. Pay tuition for 1 semester at community college. Invest in the dot-com bubble with risks. The average annual salary was around $30,000, so $1,000 represented less than 2 weeks of work. Typical prices. A gallon of gasoline, $1.10. Bread, 80 cents. New house, $130,000 on average. A new car, $15,000. Historical context. The internet changed everything. Those who invested $1,000 in companies like Amazon or Google early in this decade saw extraordinary returns. The 2000s, new millennium. The 2000s brought the dot-com bubble, September 11th, and the 2008 financial crisis. What you could buy. $1,000 was now definitely middle money. You could buy an iPhone when it launched in 2007, $500, and still have half left. Pay a few months' rent in smaller cities. Buy a decent laptop. The average annual salary was around $40,000, so $1,000 represented about a week of work. Prices of the decade. A gallon of gasoline, $2, with major fluctuations. Bread, $1.20. New house, $240,000 on average. New car, $28,000. Historical context. A decade of economic volatility. The 2008 crisis showed how money could disappear quickly. The 2010s, recovery and technology. The 2010s saw recovery from the crisis, rise of social media, and gig economy. What you could buy. $1,000 was useful, but modest. With $1,000 you could buy a top-of-the-line iPhone. Pay 1 month's rent in many cities. Invest in cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin cost pennies at the beginning of the decade. The average annual salary was around $50,000, so $1,000 represented 1 week of work. Typical prices: a gallon of gasoline, $2.50. Bread, $1.50. New house, $290,000 on average. New car, $33,000. Historical context: technology dominated. Those who invested $1,000 in Bitcoin in 2010 could have millions today. The 2020s, pandemic and inflation. The current decade began with a global pandemic and record inflation. What you can buy? $1,000 today is, well, you can pay some monthly bills, buy groceries for a month or two, make a minimum down payment on a used car, buy a top-of-the-line smartphone. The average annual salary is around $60,000, so $1,000 represents less than a week of work. Current prices: a gallon of gasoline, $3.50, varies greatly. Bread, $2.50. New house, $400,000 on average. New car, $48,000. Historical context: pandemic, post-inflation, and economic uncertainty define these years. $1,000 still helps, but is far from transformative. So, what have we learned from this journey through a century of purchasing power? $1,000 in 1920 equals approximately $16,000 today, adjusted for inflation. That means the dollar has lost more than 93% of its value in 100 years. Inflation is real and relentless. Keeping money under the mattress is literally watching its value evaporate. Investing has always been essential. Those who invested $1,000 in the stock market in 1920 and held on would have millions today, even with all the crises. Timing matters. $1,000 invested in Microsoft in 1986, Apple in 1997, Amazon in 1997, or Bitcoin in 2010 would have created unimaginable fortunes. Financial education is crucial. Understanding how money works, how to invest, and how to protect your purchasing power is more important than ever. Each generation faces its own economic challenges. It's not that everything was better before. It was different. Our grandparents could buy cheaper houses, but they also earned much less and had fewer opportunities. $1,000 changed meaning drastically over the century, from a life-changing amount to emergency money. But the real question isn't how much $1,000 is worth today, but what you do with the money you have. In any era, the people who prospered were those who understood the value of money, invested wisely, and adapted to economic changes. If you had an extra $1,000 today, what would you do? Would you spend it on something that loses value, or invest it in something that can grow? History teaches us, idle money loses value. Well-invested money can change your future. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, tell me, what do your grandparents or parents tell you about prices back in the day? See you in the next video.